The Assistant Democratic Leader.
Quorum call be suspended.
The Senate is not in a quorum call.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come to the floor today to speak about the DREAM Act, a bipartisan piece of legislation that would give immigrant students who grew up in the United States a chance to earn their citizenship. This is not a new topic. It was 19 years ago that I introduced the DREAM Act. It hasn't become law yet, but it has inspired a movement of thousands of young people across this country. Back in the day when I introduced this bill and you talked about the Dreamers, people thought you were talking about a British rock group. In this case, the Dreamers happen to be a group of people living in America who are desperately trying to become part of America's future. They came to the United States as children, infants, toddlers, kids. They are American in every way except for a piece of paper on their immigration status. They've gone to our schools. They sit next to us in church. They're the kids that you see on the playground with your own kids, but they're undocumented. And because they're undocumented, they are subject to deportation at any moment in their lives. They end up going to school, but it's tougher for them. They don't qualify for Pell Grants, federal loans. They have to find a way to save the money or find a way to secure a scholarship that just might be available to them. But it's rare. Most of the time it means a longer period of time in college before they can finish as they save up the money. But ultimately they're trained to become our teachers, our nurses, our doctors, our engineers, and even our soldiers. Today I'm reintroducing the DREAM Act. My co-sponsor, Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, and chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I want to thank Lindsey Graham for joining me in this bipartisan effort. Bipartisanship is rare in this chamber, and on an issue of controversy, it's even rarer. Lindsey and I have a long history of working together because we believe that Congress has an obligation to do the job we were elected to do and pass legislation that solves problems. Lindsey and I were partners in the Gang of Eight, 4 Democratic senators and 4 Republican senators. That was the gang with the great John McCain, Chuck Schumer, Marco Rubio, Lindsey, Jeff Flake, Bob Menendez, and Michael Bennet. We wrote a comprehensive immigration reform bill a few years back, 2013. We brought it to the floor of the United States Senate. We covered virtually every aspect of immigration law, and believe me, immigration law is a mess, and it needed that kind of comprehensive approach. We brought it up for a vote on the floor, and the vote was 68 to 32. It was a bipartisan vote. After months of working on this bill, we couldn't have been happier. We finally had a bipartisan bill to address the immigration challenge in America. The bill left here and went to the House of Representatives under Republican leadership, and it died. They wouldn't even consider it, wouldn't debate it, certainly wouldn't vote on it. Look at the mess we have today in the United States because of our immigration laws, and consider the possibility that 6 years ago, we'd finally found a path that could lead us to a bipartisan solution. That path's still there. Part of that immigration law was the DREAM Act, which we're reintroducing today. In 2010, I joined with Republican Senator Dick Lugar of Indiana. We called on the President Obama, to use his authority as president to protect these dreamers from deportation. In other words, if we couldn't pass the law, could the President do something to help protect them? President Barack Obama responded. He created a program called the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Program. It's known as DACA. Here's what DACA said. We'll give you 2 years at a time, temporary legal status to stay in the United States and not be deported and be able to work in this country. But if you want that temporary status, renewable every 2 years, you've got to report to the government, go through a comprehensive background investigation, pay a fee, agree that you'll pay all your taxes, then we'll give you a chance to stay here, go to school, and work, and not be afraid of that knock on the door. More than 800,000 dreamers stepped forward. They came forward in an extraordinary way. I can remember the first day when then Congressman Luis Gutierrez and I decided at Navy Pier in Chicago, which is a huge gathering place, that we would have a sit-down for these young people so they could fill out the forms and apply for DACA status. We initially thought we were going to have 1,000. We didn't know what we would do with it. And then 2,000, and then 3,000. And it turned out, Mr. President, that families literally stood in line all night long for the chance to come across that threshold, sit down with a volunteer, and fill out their form for DACA status. Mothers and fathers in tears with their kids, thinking, at least my son or my daughter will have a chance not to be deported and to be part of America. More than 800,000 of these dreamers came forward, and they received DACA protection because of President Obama's executive order. 43,000 were in my state of Illinois. DACA has unleashed the full potential of these dreamers who are contributing to our country in so many ways. Teachers and soldiers, engineers, small business owners. But then came the day with a new president, President Donald Trump. On September 5th, 2017, President Trump announced he would repeal DACA and the protections that it gave these people. Hundreds of thousands of dreamers faced losing their work permits, and even worse, being deported from the only country they'd ever known, being sent back to places they couldn't even remember. When President Trump announced the repeal of DACA, he called on Congress to legalize DACA. Since then, President Trump has rejected every single bipartisan deal we've offered him on the subject. I'm not giving up on the DREAM Act, and I'm not giving up on the Dreamers. You would think after all these years and all these young people, that people would be coming to the floor who are against the DREAM Act and against DACA, telling horrible stories about the young people that we're talking about today. Strangely, that's never happened. I'm sure there's going to be somebody to disappoint me. That's human nature. But overwhelmingly, these young people are just nothing short of amazing. I've come to the floor of the Senate more than 100 times to tell their stories, because I think that's the best way for you to understand why this issue is so important. This is an amazing young woman. Her name is Carla Robles. Carla Robles is the 116th dreamer whom I've told the story of on the floor of the Senate. Brought to the United States from Mexico when she was 8 years old, grew up in Chicago, where her mom and dad worked long hours at a pizza restaurant. Carla's parents told her and her brothers and sisters, no matter what happens, make sure you stay out of trouble and study real hard. It'll pay off someday. That's exactly what Carla did. When Carla started school in the 3rd grade, she didn't speak English, but she worked hard and quickly became an excellent student. Carla wrote me a letter and she said, quote, education has been an important part of my life, and the teachers who took the time to guide my family and me are the big reason that I've been a success. In the 7th grade, Carla received the American Legion Award, this undocumented young girl, which was given to the one boy and one girl in the class who, quote, are deemed most worthy of the high qualities of citizenship and Americanism. In high school, Carla Robles was a member of the National Honor Society and the President's Club and active in student government. She participated in a program called Trust, where she agreed to volunteer her personal time to mentor younger students. She was captain and MVP of the varsity tennis team. She received her associate's degree from Harper College. She is now a senior at Loyola University in Chicago. A special word about Loyola University in Chicago. This is an amazing campus which is doing its best to give people just like Carla a chance in life. They have created something called Arupe College, which is a basically no-cost approach to higher education for some of the poorest families in Chicago, and they don't exclude kids who are protected by DACA or Dreamers. Loyola Medical School is one of the few in the United States with open competition where DACA students can apply. 32 medical students at Loyola in Chicago are undocumented. They're DACA and dreamers. They desperately want to be part of America, and part of the agreement is if they go to medical school at Loyola, borrowing money to do it, they've got to pay back a year of service in an underserved area of the state of Illinois for the money that they're receiving to go to school. Back to Carla. During college, she was on the National Honor Roll, the Dean's List. She volunteers with an outreach program for at-risk kids and with AmeriCorps Vista, and she founded another tutoring program for elementary students. I know Carla a little better than some of the dreamers because she interned in my Washington, D.C. office here last year. What does she want to do at the end of this journey if she can stay in America? She wants to be a teacher in the Chicago Public Schools. She wants to pursue a master's degree and become a high school guidance counselor. There's some people who look at this picture and say, this is not an American citizen, tell her to leave. I look at this picture and think we are lucky to have her. This nation of immigrants is lucky to have this young woman who simply wants to give back to America. That's all she's asking for. Nothing special, just let her give back to this country. And so today we reintroduce the DREAM Act. I hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will come forward and join Senator Lindsey Graham, my Republican co-sponsor, and myself. We think there are about 1.8 million young people eligible for the DREAM Act in the United States. They've never known another country. When they walk into the classroom in their schools in the morning, they stand up and put their hands on their chest and pledge allegiance to the only flag they've ever known. They were just kids when they were brought here. Shouldn't we do the right thing in America? This nation of immigrants, this country of opportunity, this bright city on the hill, this shining city on the hill? Yes, we should. And for the dreamers, and for their moms and dads, we've got to renew our commitment that the next generation of Americans coming from all over the world will continue to make this one of the finest countries on earth. Mr. President, I yield the floor.